a lot to the organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak to this esteemed audience. And thanks, Ramsu, for setting the stage with such an excellent presentation. It makes my work even tougher as I see it. So from the government perspective, I think on the use of data and analytics, we are more of a laggard. We have been more of a laggard, but there are a few initiatives that we are working on in the last few years, and this is to give you a walkthrough on some of those initiatives. To start with, I'll give you an overview about what NITI Aayog is. This is the new name of the Planning Commission which came in here. We have primarily these 4 responsibilities: working with the states. Innovation is one of our core responsibilities. Development and monitoring is another core responsibility that comes to this organization. And when you are talking about development and monitoring, very important things that come up is that this is a key input into the policy making process. And how policy making has happened over the last few years since independence and over the last 50 years is that we have relied a lot on surveys. You can see this is the traditional process in which policy making has happened. We have relied a lot on surveys and which have a lag of say 5 or 10 years. And now with this dynamic world coming up, we need a more real-time feedback loop, where we can get the evaluation of the inputs at a more faster pace. And to do this, we need to do and collect data at a more real-time pace. So on this aspects, particularly to get data at a more real-time pace, what are the initiatives that we are doing at NITI Aayog is listed here. So the top boxes that you see are the ranking and the listing of the states. So often when you see like the central government at Delhi, we do not have a relationship with the states like the central government is the CEO and each state is like a department or department where you can direct them and tell them what to do. It's often like guidelines that you can give, and then states are up to themselves how they perform and how they go about doing things. So often you see some states which are performing much better than the average, and you will see some states which are lagging behind. There is no strict control that we have on there. One thing that was devised was the ease of doing business ranking, which was done by the Ministry of Commerce. What it did was that it created a sense of competition between the states. And in the first year when it was launched, we saw the usual states on the south as the top rankers. But in the year 2 and year 3, because of this competition and this becoming a major factor for foreign direct investment in those states, we see a lot of states lower down, like say Jharkhand, for example, coming up much higher up in the top 2 or top 3 ranking. So what this does is that this creates a sense of ranking. Media picks these things up, and that creates pressure on the political class and the bureaucratic class to perform and to do more development-oriented work. So keeping on those lines, NITI Aayog has started doing indexing on lot of these parameters that you see the top 7 on the top. Like these are yearly indexes where we collect data which are not input specific data but more outcome oriented data. This is something when you are in the corporate, I'm sure all of you are coming from the corporate world, and I have spent like 16 years before this in the corporate world. This is something that we do bread and butter every day. But for the government, this is something we are doing some sort of a very simple scorecard based methods and we providing some weights and ranking the states. But this is something that helping them understand where they are and then work on the various aspects. Health, education are very important. Water and management of the water, because water is a scarce resource. Sustainable development goals is a very important commitment that we have to the UN, and when working on that. Digital transformation includes moving the government services on a digital platform. This brings in a lot of transparency that is there. Innovation is very important in the states because if there is innovation, there is a growth in the startups and then the growth in the manufacturing and the industry ecosystem there, and then the energy efficiency. India, if you see that the transmission and distribution losses, average of India is in the range of 22 to 24%, whereas the global average is around 8%. A lot of this has to do with modernizing the transmission and distribution lines and the grids, which the states do, the state electricity boards have the responsibility to do, so once they take up this activity. While the top ones are the state level analysis, we often see that there are certain states which are doing okay or doing well or average ranking, but there are certain districts in those states which are lagging behind. So we are going on to the district level hospitals. These are permanently government hospitals, again evaluating all of them from their outputs and performance, more of the operational efficiency, and trying to see how the district hospitals are doing. Basically ranking all the district hospitals and putting them into certain grades of things. These are some type of activities that are happening for the first time in the government setting. Any comfortable discussion in India cannot end without the discussion on pendency of court cases. Everyone knows about this. There are several movies and films on this topic, but are we doing anything really about it? There's an initiative that we are trying to do, ranking the district courts and the high courts, where you can see like very simple thing, like you take a particular type of case and you see in a particular state, that case might be solved in say 2 years in a certain districts, where in some other district it has been solved in 5 years or 10 years. Finding out what the reasons are for that and doing a root cause analysis of the whole thing would help you identify the reasons for that, and this can go on to the level of ranking of the judges. This judiciary is a thing that is tightly been in the hand of the Supreme Court E-Committee. So this is something that we can do only at the recommendation of them. So we can only do things which they recommend, though analytically a lot of things are possible, but what we can put in the open domain and what we can analyze is something that they are working on. Ease of living is another very important indicator which we are trying to now evaluate. We look at 7 different aspects of every district and block level. This ranges from education, basic education level, healthcare, access, infrastructure, financial inclusion, proportion of the population living below poverty, skilling and other aspects. And then looking at all these aspects, we see how livable the district is there. These are all the initiatives there. The National Data Analytics Portal is one thing that we see, because once we sitting in a ministry, we ask some data from some other ministry or the state government, the only thing that they share is a PDF file at max or a paper file. And there is a lot of these PDF files and data lying in silos across all of the government, in central ministry and the state government. This activity, which is the National Data Analytics Portal, this is a vendor-driven activity which will be there, and the RFP for this is out, is to pull in all this data in this various unstructured and semi-structured form, and then transform them into a tabular format and put them in our database so that citizens and researchers can get data into a single place for the purpose of dissemination and research. And this is for a easy visualization interface is also proposed, so that citizens can get a lot of storytelling based on data based on this. Now coming on to some of the activities that we are doing on the AI front. I think all of you will be aware about what AI is. Basically trying to develop a machine which emulates a lot of the human-like functions, which is there. On the history of AI, I think a lot of this is known to you. This is a field which has existed since the 1950s, with the early papers coming around that time. Around the 70s and 80s, we saw like the AI winter, because the promises that are been made by AI was not been fulfilled by the researchers or the domain experts, and that was also because of the limitation of the computing resources, cheap computing resources, and huge amounts of digital data which was there. Then we see a few breakthroughs which are there in the box below. We see the IBM Deep Blue defeating Kasparov in 1996. This was a very significant activity, but it was primarily logical in nature, the game of chess. So it was good, but it was not on the level where it can emulate the cognitive skills of a human, like say seeing, comprehending, or talking, which are very much human-like. Or say, I can see that someone is not very happy, so speak to him in a different manner as to someone who is maybe very enthusiastic. So we see another breakthrough in 2011 where IBM Watson defeated the best players in Jeopardy, and this is a quiz show where the question, where the answer is given, you have to guess the question, where you have to go through a large number of documents, comprehend and create the question, and then answer it on the fly. And so a large amount of cognitive skills are involved, which was then demonstrated. Then in 2012, the ImageNet database, and in 2015, the ImageNet did better performance than the human people. Then you see the Tuning Award, but was won by this chatbot Eugene Gottsman, where it fooled real humans into believing that this chatbot is actually a human and not a machine. So this a significant development brought us to the point that we can now think seriously about AI for a lot of our activities that are happening there. And just to demystify one of the things, deep learning, we talk a lot about deep learning, though this is mostly the young people who are coming in this domain. They feel that deep learning is a new invention. Unfortunately, my personal views, it might be a debatable topic. My personal view is that the theory of deep learning is basically multi-layered neural network perceptron. And if you have done computer science in the last 10-15 years, we have done that with, say, 2 or 3 layers, hand-coded all the maths on a calculator with 2 to 3 nodes in each layer, and that itself took us half an hour to 45 minutes to solve the problem. Now we have thousands of layers and millions of nodes in each layer, and this is possible because we have enough data to train so many nodes and so many layers. And not only that, we also have the compute power to handle that. I think the breakthrough is only in terms of data and hardware and computing infrastructure. The algorithm was there for a long time. Now coming from the theory of AI to where India is placed, because when I, sitting in NITI Aayog, look at AI, we are looking at AI for India as a whole. So if you see, India is not one of the leaders in either AI patents or AI companies. This was a 2016 snapshot from The Economist. Since that time, US has gone 3,000 plus, and China has gone to about 1,200 AI startups, where India remains around the same level of, say, 200 to 400 AI startups. So what we can do to enthuse this ecosystem is the primary task that we are working on now. So we are working on a national AI strategy. The draft version will be out by the end of this month, possibly next week, and an AI task force which will work on removing a lot of barriers which are there in AI adoption, rapid AI adoption in the Indian ecosystem. We would like to see more India-specific startups coming up, and more AI companies in India who are becoming global brands. And these are the 6 areas that we are primarily focusing in for India's leadership in AI. A lot of them is dependent on data and having access to annotated data, what the government can do, creating a marketplace, creating a crowdsourced marketplace where a lot of this computing data can be made available. Making infrastructure available to smaller startups who cannot afford that, so that they can rapidly develop their stuff. Skill development in AI is very important, and we are tying up with several companies on that front. Government is leading the adoption on several of these aspects, and I'll talk a bit about some of those. A lot of the things that happens is that because the university structures in India are like, we have separate academic institutions for management, separate for technology, separate for arts, a lot of this, and separate for medical sciences. A lot of this innovations happens maybe in the Stanford and MIT, because we have these different schools co-located together. So government is trying to play a pivotal role in bringing these players together through partnerships, So you can see there are wonders happens when you can bring a medical practitioner or an agriculture practitioner with a computer scientist, or an economics person with a computer scientist. This hardly happens, and there are like less than 5 or 6 examples in India where people are working along those lines. This has to scale up heavily. This collaborations has to be the key in driving this AI adoptions, where we will come to know the domain problem and the technology that can solve these problems. So these are again a different view. So we are working primarily on 3 pillars: accelerating pure AI research. That is very important. Pure and applied AI research is very important. That is primarily the research and the academia is primarily fine-tuned to do that. The next is taking those research and productizing that, where the engineering becomes of core importance there, tying up with engineering companies and startups in the middle layer, and then the commercialization and innovation, because you can go that far, but ultimately if the venture is not commercial, viable and profit making, then it will die out. So how we can see how we can support each of these things, and we are particularly our agenda is to work on areas of inclusive growth, and we are working on 3 areas particularly now: healthcare, agriculture, and Indian languages, which I'll walk you through. So we are talking of connected agriculture, where food security is very important. Identifying what are the food needs for India, and how much food can we export at a profitable rate. This requires seeds and fertilizers at adequate amount to be supplied for the same. A lot of them, of the agriculture happens based on rainwater, but when rainwater is not available, you have to rely on irrigation water and efficient irrigation techniques. Electricity is often required to pump out water, and diesel is also very important for the tractors to run. It's very important to have road infrastructure to the warehouses, for the produce to go to the nearest place. All of this requires money, where the loan, so tying up with the people who give the loan to ensure that they get the minimum support price for their produce, and then this has to tie up. Can you just go back? So this has to also tie up with the, go to that slide if it's possible. Last se pehle, third last. So it has to also tie up with the weather information, and also satellites and drones are being used heavily these days for monitoring this. All this is very good, but we have to ultimately tie it up with communicating the results to the farmers, so the stakeholders. Just give me. Does it work with this side or this side? Stops here. Yes, so communicating all of the information back to the individual farmers leads to the precision agriculture. So the communication part is very important. So we are working towards a early warning and communication system which is there. As a first step of that, there has been some success which has been shown by Microsoft in some of the districts in Andhra Pradesh. This is something that we are piloting in 25 districts now to see as just based on satellite imagery and weather condition, can we increase the yield of this. So this is the first time that we are doing a large scale AI pilot in India in the agriculture sector. The next thing that we see is in the healthcare domain. Healthcare, if you see the domain in India, it is primarily reactive. All of you drive cars. You take your car to servicing every 6 months, 3 months, but often you see we don't ourselves go for servicing of our body that often. Few might do, but most of us don't do that. Our tendency towards healthcare is a very reactive. Only when something happens we go to the hospitals. So, and that leads to increase in the cost. So we go to the hospitals or the healthcare when there is emergency. And it's even more grave for the rural people who are staying in the villages. There is an estimate that 30 to 40% of the people go into poverty because of the healthcare shocks that they receive. So we are trying with some two diseases, early risk of cardiac diseases and early risk of diabetic retinopathy. One is a simple predictive analytic solution, and the other is more of an image processing, looking at the eye and telling. This is again where the models have been developed. We are trying to see if this can be piloted in certain districts, in certain primary healthcare centers in 2 districts, is what we are working on. We talk a lot about chatbots. Chatbots are very good. Google talks about it a lot, but chatbots are available only in English. We have, out of 1.3 billion population, 200 million is speaking English. 1.1 billion, no one is thinking about them. I would request you to go into this area and look. There is a huge customer base which is lying, which if you can tap, it will be very profitable. Just give me 1 minute. So we are trying, and then there is a lot of research that has happened on this area in silos. So we are trying to develop a framework where we can put all this research in this primarily 8 languages which cover a billion population, bring them together into a framework which then the app developers and people can use as an NLP toolkit, like it is available for English and on other European languages for the Indian languages. So I think that brings end. If there is questions I can take, or I think there is no time.